Hi, I'm Mr. Simons, and in this video, we're going to go over the factors that affect the elasticity of demand. I'm here, green screen behind, lights, doing a few filming activities at school and thought I might just squeeze in a quick economics video for you at home, looking at this elasticity of demand concept. So in this video, we're going to look at the main factors that affect the price elasticity of demand. If you hear the term price elasticity of demand and you are like, what does this mean? You should go to that video up the top, or the link will be in the description. So the first factor we'll get into is whether a good is a luxury or a necessity. So a necessity is something you can't live without. So most people might think of things like water, bread, milk, that kind of things, those consumer staples or essentials that people rely on. So if something is a necessity that you absolutely have to have it, also think about petrol, that the price elasticity of demand will be relatively inelastic, that even if price goes up, there won't be a big change in quantity demanded because people really need it. If we think about luxury goods, it can be a little bit more complicated because on the one hand, you don't really need a luxury. You could get a car, you don't have to get a Bentley. So if Bentleys become more expensive, well, people might want less. But the issue I have with luxury goods is that often the more expensive they are, the more people actually want them. And you could think about luxuries and say, well, demand is sort of elastic or inelastic depending on the brand, the product, the price, a lot of other factors there as well. So let's also think about whether a good has any close substitutes, because if the price of a good goes up, but there are no close substitutes, what are consumers going to do? There's no other good that they can buy that will give them the same benefit or features. So if a good or service has a lot of substitutes, if the price goes up, you can just pick another one. So if a good or service has close substitutes, then demand will be relatively elastic because when price goes up, consumers can change their behavior. Let's also think about the expenditure or the cost of the good as a proportion of people's incomes. So that if a good or a service takes up only a very small proportion of people's incomes, if the price goes up, then people may not adjust too much. They might still buy it because it is still relatively cheap. Think here about a packet of gum, that if a packet of gum goes up by 20%, okay, that is more expensive, but it's still a relatively small proportion of people's incomes. If, for example, a car goes up by 50% in price, that is a very expensive purchase for many people, a large proportion of people's incomes, so demand would be relatively elastic. So the way we think about it is the cheaper the good, the less it is as a proportion of people's income, the more inelastic the demand is. The more expensive the good, well, the more elastic demand is likely to be because it takes up so much of people's incomes. So if it goes up, then people will really have to think hard about whether they can actually afford it. The other thing to think about is the length of time since a price change. And so what we mean by that is that when the price of a good or service changes, consumers often can't change their choices straight away. So if you think about it, if you are, say, for example, going to a gym and then the gym increases the price of membership, you might be familiar with that gym, you know the equipment, you know the trainers, it's close to you. Even though it's more expensive, you might not change your behavior straight away because you're used to it. But over time, you might be like, well, I'm prepared to go a bit further. I'll look at another gym because it will be cheaper. So what we say is that immediately after a price change, demand is relatively inelastic. Consumers can't quickly change their behavior, but as time goes on, demand becomes more elastic as consumers can make choices and research and find alternatives that could be cheaper. The final category we can look at in terms of the factors that affect the elasticity of demand is whether a good is habit forming or not. That if a good is addictive, well, even if the price goes up, what are you going to do? There's nothing else that might give you that kind of same sense of satisfaction. So here we're thinking about, for example, cigarettes, that if the price of cigarettes goes up, generally demand is pretty inelastic because what are you going to do instead? So this is why governments tend to tax things like cigarettes, because even if they keep the price going up and up and up, people will still buy them because it is habit forming. It is addictive. Okay, so here was a look at the key factors that affect the elasticity of demand. If you got any questions, well, drop them in the comments. Please like this video if it was useful. That'd be helpful for me. And I'll see you in the next video.